The first black car stopped outside Bellini House at 8:17 on a bitter Thursday night. The second stopped behind it. Then the third. Snow drifted beneath the streetlights of Boston, bright against the polished metal and dark windows. Inside the restaurant, forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations faded. Even the pianist near the marble staircase stopped playing. Clara Bennett stood beside table 12 with a tray pressed against her hip. Her manager still had his fingers wrapped around her wrist. Leonard Pike had dragged her away from the kitchen only moments earlier, after accusing her of embarrassing an important customer. The customer had deliberately knocked a glass of wine onto the floor, then demanded that Clara kneel and clean his shoes. Clara had refused. Leonard had smiled for the dining room, but his grip had tightened until pain traveled through her arm. "You are replaceable, Clara," he said quietly. "Remember that before you decide to have pride again." The restaurant doors opened. 4 men in black coats entered first. Their movements were controlled, their eyes scanning every doorway, every window, every hand above every table. Then the stranger from the alley walked inside. For one stunned second, Clara did not recognize him. The night before, he had been pale from blood loss, sitting against a brick wall behind the restaurant with snow collecting in his dark hair. His shirt had been torn near his ribs. His hands had trembled despite the fury in his eyes. Now he wore a black tailored suit that looked more expensive than everything Clara owned. A silver watch rested against his wrist. A faint cut marked his cheek. His posture was straight, his expression calm, and an entire room full of wealthy people seemed afraid to breathe in his presence. Over his shoulders, stretched tightly across his powerful frame, was Clara's burgundy wool coat. The inexpensive coat was several years old. One sleeve had been repaired twice. The buttons did not match because Clara had replaced them one at a time whenever they fell off. It looked almost absurd over his suit, yet nobody laughed. Leonard released Clara's wrist so quickly that her arm dropped against her side. The stranger noticed the red marks on her skin. His gaze moved from her wrist to Leonard's face. Something in the room changed. The stranger approached without hurry. His men remained behind him, but their hands rested beneath their coats. Leonard swallowed. "Mr. Salvatore," he said, "we were not expecting you." Clara felt the blood leave her face. Salvatore. Everyone in Boston knew the name. Nico Salvatore controlled the waterfront. Dozens of construction companies, several nightclubs, and enough politicians that newspapers avoided printing his photograph without permission. There were stories about men who betrayed him and disappeared. Stories about deals made in candlelit rooms. Stories about rival organizations that had abandoned entire neighborhoods after hearing that Nico had taken an interest in them. Clara had never believed half of those stories. Looking at the fear in Leonard's eyes, she began to believe all of them. Nico stopped directly in front of her manager. "Why were you touching her?" His voice was quiet. That made it worse. Leonard forced a laugh. It was a misunderstanding. Clara has difficulty respecting authority. Nico looked at Clara. "Does he often leave marks on you?" Clara should have been frightened into silence. She should have protected her job and pretended everything was fine. Instead, she lifted her chin. Only when witnesses are too rich to care. Several customers looked away. Nico returned his attention to Leonard. "Hold out your hand." Leonard stared at him. "Mr. Salvatore, I do not understand." Nico removed one glove. "Hold out the hand you used to touch her." Leonard slowly obeyed. Nico closed his fingers around Leonard's wrist. There was no dramatic motion, no raised voice, no public threat. Leonard's face simply turned white. Nico tightened his grip until Leonard fell to one knee beside the overturned wine glass. The wealthy customer, who had demanded Clara clean his shoes, pushed his chair backward. Nico looked down at Leonard. "You mistook her kindness for weakness. That is a dangerous mistake." He released him. Leonard remained on the floor, clutching his wrist. Nico turned toward Clara, up close. She could see the exhaustion behind his controlled expression. She could also see where dried blood darkened the inside of her coat near his ribs. He had returned wearing it because he had never taken it off. "I came to return this," he said. Clara stared at him. "You brought an armed convoy to return a coat." A faint shift touched his mouth. It was not quite a smile. "I was told I have poor social instincts." One of the bodyguards looked carefully at the floor. Clara folded her arms. "You are still bleeding. It is not serious. You said that last night." "Last night. I was correct. Last night, you could barely stand." His gaze held hers. "Yet you trusted me enough to place your only coat around my shoulders." Clara lowered her voice. "I did not trust you. I just did not want you to freeze to death behind a restaurant." For the first time since entering, Nico appeared uncertain. It lasted less than a second. Then he removed the coat. The cold had followed him inside, and snowflakes still clung to the wool. When he offered it to her, Clara noticed that the fabric had been cleaned. The loose buttons had been replaced, and the torn lining had been carefully repaired. She did not take it. "You need it more than I do," she said. Several people in the room looked at her as if she had lost her mind. Nico looked down at the coat, then back at her. "I own other coats." "Then why are you wearing mine? Because it was given to me." Something deep and unexpected moved through her. Before she could answer, a sharp crack exploded against the front window. The glass shattered. Nico moved before Clara understood what was happening. His arm wrapped around her waist, and he drove her toward the floor as another shot struck the wall above them. Customers screamed. Tables overturned. Plates crashed. The pianist crawled behind the instrument. Nico covered Clara with his body while his men drew weapons and surrounded them. His hand cradled the back of her head, pressing her face against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. It was slow, steady, terrifyingly calm. "Stay beneath me," he ordered. Another shot broke through the window. Clara flinched. Nico's body tightened around hers. His voice dropped until only she could hear it. "No one is taking you from this room." She did not know why he sounded as if someone had already tried the night before. Clara had been closing the restaurant alone. Leonard had sent the kitchen staff home early to save money, leaving her to clean the final tables and carry garbage into the alley. Snow had been falling since afternoon, covering the city in deceptive softness. Clara had just thrown the last bag into the metal container when she heard breathing behind her. A man sat against the brick wall near the rear entrance. At first she thought he was homeless. Then she saw the tailored black shirt, the expensive shoes, and the blood spreading beneath his hand. His eyes lifted toward her. They were dark, cold, and completely alert. "Do not scream," he said. Clara held the garbage bag between them as though it could protect her. That sentence usually makes people scream. "I am not going to hurt you. You are bleeding in an alley at midnight. Forgive me for requiring more evidence." He tried to stand. Pain forced him back against the wall. Clara should have gone inside and called the police. She should have locked the door and waited until someone arrived. Instead, she noticed the snow collecting on his shoulders. He was not wearing a coat. Neither was she. Hers hung on a hook inside the kitchen. "Stay there," she said. His expression hardened. "I was not planning to dance." She returned with her burgundy coat, a bowl of hot vegetable soup, a clean towel, and the restaurant first aid box. He watched her approach as if kindness were another kind of weapon. Clara placed the soup beside him. "Can you lift your shirt? That depends on your intentions." Her eyes narrowed. "My intention is to determine whether you are dying before my manager blames me for the stain." He almost smiled. Almost. Clara knelt in the snow and moved his hand away from his ribs. The wound was deep but narrow. It looked as though something had cut across his side. A bullet had passed close enough to tear the skin. You were shot. I was missed. That is an optimistic interpretation. She pressed the clean towel against him. He did not react to the pain, but his hand closed around her wrist. Clara froze. His fingers were strong despite his weakness. Who are you? He asked. Clara Bennett. Why are you helping me? Clara Bennett, because you are injured. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you need. She pulled free and wrapped a bandage around his ribs. When she finished, she placed the burgundy coat over his shoulders. It barely fit. He looked down at it. This is yours. You are very observant. You will freeze. I am going back inside. You are the one sitting in the snow. He studied her face. Clara had spent most of her life learning what people saw when they looked at her. A soft body, round cheeks, a waitress uniform stretched across curves she could not hide. Someone easy to dismiss. Someone expected to be grateful for any attention. The stranger did not look at her that way. He looked as if he were trying to understand something that threatened him. Clara placed the soup in his hands. Eat before it gets cold. A black car appeared at the far end of the alley. The stranger reached beneath the coat. Clara saw the outline of a weapon. Her breath caught. The rear door of the car opened, and a broad-shouldered man hurried toward them. Boss, he said. We have been searching everywhere. Clara slowly stood. The stranger never looked away from her. The man beside the car saw Clara's uniform and the coat around his boss. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. The stranger rose with visible effort. Keep the coat, Clara said. He held her gaze. I return what belongs to others. There was something almost bitter in the way he said it. Clara stepped backward toward the restaurant door. Then return it when you no longer need it. He left with her coat around his shoulders and her soup still in his hands. Clara had expected never to see him again. Less than a day later, she was lying beneath him while bullets destroyed the front of her restaurant. The attack lasted 40 seconds. It felt like an hour. Nico's men moved with brutal precision. 2 dragged customers into the kitchen. 1 returned fire through the broken window. Another pulled Leonard away from the entrance when he tried to run. Then the street became silent. Nico lifted his head. Clara felt warmth beneath her hand. Blood. The wound at his ribs had opened again. You are hurt, she whispered. Not enough to matter. That is becoming your favorite lie. His eyes found hers. You are not frightened of me. I am currently more frightened of whoever is shooting at us. Nico rose and pulled her with him. His hand remained around her waist. A bodyguard approached. The vehicle is secure. The shooters abandoned the building across the street. Find them. Nico said. The man nodded, then glanced at Clara. Nico understood the question without hearing it. She comes with us. Clara stepped away from him. No. His gaze sharpened. Someone fired into a crowded restaurant because I was standing beside you. That sounds like your problem. It became yours when they saw my hands on you. The words settled between them. Leonard emerged from behind the bar, sweating heavily. Clara cannot leave. Her shift is not finished. Nico turned his head. Leonard immediately stopped speaking. Clara looked at her manager. You were hiding while I was being shot at. But you are worried about my shift. Leonard forced his expression into something resembling authority. Your employment has responsibilities. Nico reached inside his suit and removed a black card. How much does she earn in one night? That is private information. Nico looked at one of his men. The bodyguard walked toward Leonard. Leonard spoke quickly. $200. Depending on tips. Nico placed the card on the nearest table. Charge $20,000. Clara stared at him. No. He looked at her. No, you cannot purchase my agreement. I am replacing the income you will lose because of me. Then replace $200. The room was silent enough to hear snow blowing through the broken window. Nico watched her with a strange intensity. Leonard looked between them as if Clara had become more dangerous than the armed men. Nico put the card away. $200, he said. Clara took her coat from where it had fallen during the attack. There was a new bullet hole through one sleeve. She held it up. You returned it in better condition. Nico looked at the damage. I will have it repaired again. You are not getting it back. Something almost possessive entered his gaze. We will discuss that later. There is no later. His eyes darkened. There is now. Nico's penthouse occupied the highest floors of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. Clara hated it immediately. The ceilings were too high. The windows were too wide. Every surface gleamed with expensive emptiness. There were no family photographs. No books left open. No shoes near the door. The rooms looked designed for a man who expected to leave without warning. Nico's security chief introduced himself as Gabriel Rizzo. He was the man who had collected Nico from the alley. Gabriel gave Clara a careful look as a physician examined Nico's reopened wound in the living room. You saved his life, Gabriel said. Clara stood with her arms crossed. He says the bullet missed him. Gabriel looked toward Nico. The bullet passed through his shirt, struck a metal railing, and sent fragments into his side. He lost enough blood to collapse 3 streets away. Nico's expression became colder. Gabriel, I thought she deserved the accurate version. Clara looked at Nico. You lied. I simplified. You were dying. I have survived worse. That does not make this insignificant. The physician stitched the wound while Nico watched Clara rather than the needle. When the physician finished, Gabriel received a message on his phone. His expression changed. Nico noticed. Speak. The abandoned weapons were registered to a company connected to Vitali Shipping. Nico became still. Clara recognized the name. Vitali Shipping delivered wine to Bellini House every Wednesday. Nico saw the recognition on her face. What do you know about that company? Nothing. I sign delivery forms sometimes. Leonard makes me because he says management is too busy. What exactly do you sign invoices? Storage receipts. Sometimes empty forms that he fills out later. Gabriel cursed under his breath. Nico stood. Clara. Those forms may connect you to illegal shipments. Her stomach tightened. What kind of shipments? Nico did not answer. Clara stepped closer. What kind weapons? He said. She stared at him. Bellini House is a restaurant. The basement is larger than the dining room. There is access to an old service tunnel that reaches the harbor. Clara remembered the locked wine cellar. Leonard never allowed staff downstairs during deliveries. He had fired a dishwasher for opening the wrong door. You knew this before tonight? She said. I suspected it. Was that why you were behind the restaurant? Nico looked toward the windows. I was meeting someone who claimed to have proof. What happened to that person? Dead. Clara's anger gave way to a cold fear. Someone killed him and tried to kill you. Yes. Now they think I know something. Yes. She looked at Gabriel. How long do I have to stay here? Until we know who ordered the attack. That is not a length of time. Nico answered instead. You will stay until I can guarantee that no one will follow you home. Clara laughed once without humor. You cannot guarantee anything. People shot through a restaurant window while you were standing beside me. Nico rose slowly. And you survived because I was standing beside you. The words were arrogant. They were also true. Clara looked at his bandaged side. You survived because I found you first. Silence filled the penthouse. Gabriel turned away to hide a reaction. Nico approached Clara until only a small distance remained between them. He was taller than she remembered from the alley. Without the blood and snow, His power seemed more controlled, but no less dangerous. "You believe that makes us equal?" he asked. "No, I believe it means neither of us gets to pretend the other is helpless." For several seconds, neither moved. Then Nico said something that surprised everyone in the room. "Agreed." Clara was given a bedroom overlooking the harbor. She did not sleep. Near midnight, she heard movement in the hallway and found Nico standing alone in the dark kitchen. He wore black pants and an open white shirt. Fresh bandages circled his ribs. One hand rested on the counter while the other held Clara's damaged coat. He had been examining the bullet hole. "You collect ruined clothing?" Clara asked. He looked over his shoulder. "I thought you were asleep. I thought powerful criminals had more interesting midnight activities." "Most of them do." She entered the kitchen. Nico laid the coat on the counter with surprising care. "My mother made the first repair on that sleeve," Clara said. His gaze returned to the uneven stitching. "She was not very good at sewing." "Neither are you." Clara looked at him sharply. He touched the newer repair near the pocket. "Your stitches are different. You noticed. I noticed things that belong to me." The words came naturally to him. Clara's expression changed. "The coat does not belong to you." Nico's hand stilled. "I was speaking about the repair." "No, you were not." He leaned against the counter. "Most people avoid correcting me. Most people are paid by you. You are now under my protection. That does not make me your property." His eyes held hers. "I know the difference. Do you?" The question landed harder than she expected. Nico looked away first. Clara saw weariness pass across his face. Not physical exhaustion. Something older. Something that had lived beneath his skin for years. She opened a cabinet and found nothing except expensive glasses. "Where is your food?" "There is a refrigerator." It contained mineral water, fruit, prepared meals, and several bottles of wine. Clara took out vegetables, eggs, and cheese. "What are you doing?" Nico asked. "Making food. There is staff for that." "There is no staff here now. They know better than to disturb me at night." Clara looked at the empty penthouse. "That sounds lonely." Nico's expression closed. "It sounds efficient." She cooked an omelet while he watched from the other side of the counter. When she placed a plate in front of him, he did not touch it. "You do not have to feed me," he said. "I know." "Why are you doing it?" "Because you have not eaten." Again. You answer as though that explains everything. For normal people, it does. His gaze dropped to the plate. No one had ever made food for him simply because he was hungry. Clara understood that, without being told, he ate in silence. When he finished, he looked at her with the same expression he had worn in the alley. Suspicion mixed with fascination. The next morning, Clara learned she could not return home. Someone had broken into her apartment during the night. Nothing valuable had been taken. The locks had been destroyed. Her mattress had been cut open. Drawers emptied, and every photograph removed from the walls. On her kitchen table, the intruders had left one of the mismatched buttons from her burgundy coat. Nico showed her the photograph Gabriel had received from the police. Clara stared at the ruined apartment. Her mother's recipe book lay open on the floor, pages torn beneath muddy footprints. "They were looking for something," Gabriel said. "I have nothing," Clara whispered. Nico stood beside her. "They believe the man I met gave you evidence." "He did not." "I know. They do not." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. Her home had never been beautiful. The heating failed every winter. The upstairs neighbor played music too loudly. The kitchen window faced a brick wall, but it had been hers. Nico watched grief move across her face. "I will replace everything." She turned toward him. "You cannot replace my mother's handwriting." His jaw tightened. "No, You cannot repair every loss with money. No, you cannot order me not to be angry. His voice softened. No. The absence of argument took the strength from her anger. Nico reached toward her face. His fingers stopped before touching her cheek. The hesitation lasted long enough for Clara to feel the warmth of his hand without contact. Then he lowered it. I will find who did this, he said. That sounded less like reassurance than a death sentence. Clara remained in the penthouse. Not because Nico ordered her to stay, but because the intruders had left her nowhere else to go. For the next several days, she watched the machinery of his world move around her. Men arrived at all hours. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Maps of the harbor covered Nico's office table. Photographs of shipping containers, restaurant employees, and city officials appeared on the walls. Nico slept no more than a few hours. He took calls during meals and returned with a colder expression each time. He gave orders that made powerful men obey without question. Yet he never raised his voice. His control frightened Clara more than anger would have. On the fourth morning, she found him in the private gym, striking a heavy bag despite the wound in his side. Blood had soaked through his bandage. Stop, Clara said. Nico hit the bag again. The physician ordered rest. The physician works for me. Your body does not. He turned. Sweat darkened his shirt. His eyes held a restless violence she had not seen before. Marco Vitali disappeared this morning. Clara recognized the name. Your shipping partner, my father's closest friend, my advisor. The man who taught me how to shoot and how to determine when someone was lying. You think he ordered the attack? I know he did. Then why is he still alive? The question surprised him. Clara stepped closer. Everyone thinks men like you kill without hesitation. Yet the person who betrayed you is still breathing. Nico looked at the floor. Because I have spent 11 years waiting to prove he murdered my father. The room became silent. Nico's father had died in a car explosion when Nico was 23. Newspapers had called it a rival attack. Marco Vitali had stood beside Nico at the funeral and helped him take control of the Salvatore organization. Nico had trusted him until 3 months earlier, when an accountant discovered payments connecting Marco to the bomb. The accountant became the dead informant behind Bellini House. Nico had gone alone because he did not know which of his men remained loyal. Clara understood then. The coldness was not emptiness. It was armor built by a man who had learned that love gave betrayal a place to enter. She picked up a towel and approached him. Nico watched her carefully. Clara pressed the towel against the blood near his ribs. He inhaled, but did not move away. You cannot destroy yourself before you reach him, she said. His gaze lowered to her face. Why do you care what happens to me? Because I am here. That is not enough. It has to be. Her hand remained against his side. His fingers lifted toward her waist. They stopped inches away. The space between them became unbearably small. Clara could feel his breath against her forehead. Nico's voice dropped. You should not look at me like that. Like what? As though there is something worth saving. Clara's heart beat harder. Maybe there is. The gym door opened. Gabriel stopped when he saw them. Nico stepped back immediately. Clara removed her hand from his side. Gabriel's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes moved between them. We found the restaurant manager, he said. Leonard Pike had tried to leave Boston with a suitcase containing $500,000. Nico's men brought him to an underground parking structure beneath one of the Salvatore hotels. Clara insisted on being present. Leonard sat tied to a metal chair. His expensive confidence had vanished. Blood marked one corner of his mouth. But he was alive. When Clara entered, he stared at her. This is your fault, he said. Nico stood beside her. Choose your next words carefully. Leonard laughed weakly. She signed every shipment. Her name is on everything. When the police find the records, they will believe she managed the accounts. Clara felt sick. You used me. You were convenient. People trust women like you. Women like me. Helpful. Invisible. Desperate to keep a job. The insult struck because part of it was true. Leonard had built his scheme around the belief that Clara would never question him. He had mistaken economic necessity for obedience. Nico stepped toward him. Where is? Marco Leonard smiled. You really do care about her. Nico's expression did not change. Leonard continued. Marco said that was impossible. He said Nico Salvatore had no vulnerable places left. Nico drew a gun from beneath his coat. Clara caught his wrist. The bodyguards around them became still. Leonard's smile faded. Nico looked at Clara's hand on him. Move, he said. No, he used me to frame her. I know. He let men destroy her home. I know. Then let me end this. Clara met his eyes. That is what Marco wants. Nico's jaw tightened. He wants you angry. He wants you reacting instead of thinking. Leonard is more useful alive. Leonard looked between them. Nico lowered the gun. Clara released his wrist. For the first time, she saw something like respect in the faces of his men. Leonard gave them the location of a warehouse connected to Marco. The warehouse was empty. Inside, they found burned documents, blood on the floor, and a wall covered with photographs. Most showed Nico. Nico entering hotels. Nico standing outside churches. Nico speaking to politicians. Nico at his father's grave. The most recent photograph showed Clara. Clara leaving work. Clara carrying groceries. Clara sitting beside her apartment window. Clara kneeling in the alley beside Nico. In one photograph, Nico wore her coat while she placed the bowl of soup in his hands. Someone had been watching them before she knew his name. Nico tore the photograph from the wall. His face became terrifyingly calm. Marco knows what she means to you, Gabriel said. Clara looked at Nico. What do I mean to you? He did not answer. That silence hurt more than it should have. A camera flash burst outside the warehouse. Then another. Reporters crowded behind the security line. By evening, photographs of Clara and Nico covered every local news site. The headlines called her a mysterious lover, a sacred mistress, and the woman behind a growing mafia conflict. Someone released copies of the forged restaurant invoices bearing Clara's signature. Police announced that she was wanted for questioning. Her face appeared beside words like weapons trafficking and organized crime. Nico watched the coverage from his office while Clara stood near the windows. Marco had turned her life into a public scandal. My friend works at the restaurant, Clara said. Mia. She will be targeted because of me. Gabriel shook his head. We moved her somewhere safe this afternoon. Clara looked at Nico. You did that without telling me. I was protecting her. You keep making decisions about my life before I know they exist. Because every hour we waste creates another opening. She walked toward him. You do not trust me enough to include me. But you expect me to trust you enough to surrender everything. Nico rose. This is not about trust. It is always about trust. He stopped close to her. You want honesty? He asked. Fine. The city believes you are my weakness. Marco will attack anyone connected to you. Rival families are questioning whether I am distracted. Men who have feared me for years are waiting to see whether affection has made me careless. Clara swallowed. Has it? His eyes moved over her face. Yes. The answer stole her breath. Nico continued before she could respond. Tomorrow night, the Salvatore Foundation is holding its winter benefit. Every important person in this city will be there. I will announce that you are under my personal protection. Clara laughed without humor. That sounds romantic. It is not meant to be. What exactly will you call me? He hesitated. My intended wife. Clara stared at him. Absolutely not. It is the strongest protection I can give you. It is a lie. It is a warning. Anyone who touches you will understand they are declaring war on me. You are using me to display strength. I am using my name to keep you alive. And what happens when your war ends? Nico's expression became unreadable. We end the arrangement. Clara looked away before he could see how deeply those words cut. She had known him less than a week. She had no right to expect anything from him. Yet she had cooked for him, touched his scars, watched him sleep in a chair outside her bedroom because he believed she did not know he was there. Somewhere between fear and fascination, she had begun imagining a man beneath the power. His plan reminded her that he had never promised to become that man. Clara agreed to the false engagement only after Marco's men sent a photograph of Mia entering the safe house. The message beneath it was simple. Kindness has consequences. The winter benefit was held inside a grand hotel ballroom filled with chandeliers and white roses. Clara wore a dark green gown selected by a stylist Nico had sent to the penthouse. It fit her curves without hiding them. The neckline revealed her shoulders. The soft fabric moved around her body like water. For years, Clara had chosen clothing designed to make her smaller. That night, she looked in the mirror and saw no reason to disappear. Nico waited outside the bedroom. He wore a black suit and no tie. When Clara stepped into the hallway, he became motionless. His gaze moved over her slowly, not with casual hunger, but with an intensity that made her skin warm. You disapprove? Clara asked. Nico's eyes returned to her face. I am deciding how many men I will have to threaten before midnight. She almost smiled. That sounds inefficient. You have made efficiency difficult. He offered his arm. Clara placed her hand against it. They entered the ballroom together. The crowd fell silent. Cameras flashed from behind the velvet barrier. Politicians, judges, business owners, and families connected to Boston's criminal world watched Nico guide Clara through the room. Whispers followed them. Clara recognized pity in some faces and contempt in others. Several women looked at her body, then at Nico, as if trying to solve an insult. A beautiful woman in a silver gown approached. Alessandra Russo was the daughter of a powerful New York family. Clara had seen photographs of her beside Nico at formal events. Alessandra kissed Nico's cheek. You disappeared before our fathers could finalize anything, she said. Clara removed her hand from his arm. Nico caught it before she could step away. Nothing was going to be finalized, he said. Alessandra looked at Clara. This is unexpected. Clara held her gazette. For me as well. Alessandra smiled. Nico usually prefers arrangements that benefit his organization. Nico's fingers tightened around Clara's hand. Clara answered before he could. Perhaps he is learning that not every human connection is a transaction. Something flickered in Nico's eyes. Alessandra studied them both. Be careful, she told Clara. Men like him do not know how to love without turning it into possession. Then she walked away. The warning remained with Clara. Nico led her onto a raised platform. The room quieted. He did not give a long speech. He simply took Clara's hand and faced the crowd. Clara Bennett is under my protection. Any accusation made against her will be answered by me. Any threat against her will be treated as an attack against the Salvatore family. Cameras flashed. Nico turned toward Clara. She knew what he expected. A public display. A convincing lie. He lifted her hand to his mouth and kissed her knuckles. The contact was gentle. His eyes were not. My intended wife, he said. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Clara looked at him and felt the lie becoming something far more dangerous. Music began. Nico guided her onto the dance floor. I did not agree to dancing, she said. You are wearing a dress that has caused 3 men to walk into furniture. I am not leaving you unattended. Jealousy does not suit you. I have never needed it before. His hand settled against her waist. Clara rested her palm on his shoulder. They moved beneath the chandeliers while the entire city watched. Nico danced with complete control. But Clara noticed his attention shifting toward every entrance. His body remained prepared for danger even while holding her. You never stop being the boss, she said. No, not even with me. His eyes met hers. Especially not with you. The answer hurt. Then he added quietly, because with you, I have something to lose. Clara's breath caught. Nico's thumb moved once against her waist. He leaned closer. For a moment, the crowd disappeared. His mouth stopped inches from hers. The ballroom windows exploded. Gunfire struck the chandeliers. Glass rained over the dance floor. Nico pulled Clara against his chest and turned, shielding her with his body. Guests screamed and scattered. One chandelier broke free from the ceiling. Nico dragged Clara beneath the stone balcony as it crashed where they had been standing. His men surrounded them. Gabriel shouted that attackers had entered through the kitchen. Nico placed a weapon in Clara's hands. Stay behind me. I do not know how to use this. Point it at anyone who approaches without my permission. What if it is you? His gaze burned into hers. You will know me. Smoke spread across the ballroom. Nico guided Clara through a service corridor while gunfire echoed behind them. At the far end, a masked man appeared. Nico fired first. The man fell. Clara froze. Nico took her face between his hands. Look at me. She did. Not at him. At me. His voice pulled her away from the violence. Clara focused on the cut near his cheek, the darkness of his eyes, and the warmth of his hands. I am getting you out, he said. A second attacker rushed from a side doorway. Clara saw him before Nico did. She raised the weapon and pulled the trigger. The shot struck the wall near the man's head. He hesitated. Nico turned and fired. The attacker collapsed. Nico stared at Clara. I missed, she whispered. You gave me time? His hand closed around hers. They escaped through the hotel kitchen and entered an armored car waiting in the alley. As the vehicle accelerated, Nico examined Clara for injuries. His hands moved over her shoulders, her arms, and her waist. I am fine, she said. He did not stop. Nico. His palms rested against her face. The control he carried everywhere else had disappeared. I almost watched that chandelier fall on you, but it did not, because I moved you 1 second before it fell. His voice broke on the final word. Clara saw fear in him, not fear of death, fear of losing her. She covered one of his hands with hers. I am here. Nico stared at her. Then he kissed her. There was nothing careful about it. His mouth claimed hers with the force of everything he had denied. Clara gripped his coat as he pulled her closer, his hand sliding behind her neck. For one breathless moment, there was no city, no betrayal, and no danger. Only the man she had found freezing in an alley. Then Nico pulled away. His forehead rested against hers. This cannot happen again, he said. Clara's heart tightened. Because it was part of the lie, because it was not. The car carried them to a safe house on the rocky Massachusetts coast. The house stood above a dark ocean, isolated beneath a winter storm. Waves struck the cliffs below. Wind shook the windows. Nico became distant after the kiss. He spent hours in a locked office with Gabriel. He answered Clara's questions with short explanations. He arranged for guards to watch every entrance. At night, he slept outside her bedroom again. Clara found him there shortly before dawn. You keep pretending to avoid me while sleeping 3 feet from my door, she said. Nico opened his eyes. I am not sleeping. That makes it stranger. He stood. Marco contacted me. Clara's humor disappeared. What did he want? You. The word hung between them. Nico walked toward the windows. He wants the evidence my accountant collected before he died. He believes it was hidden in your coat. Clara frowned. There is nothing in the coat. The original lining was replaced before I returned it. Marco believes something was sewn inside. Did your people find anything? No. Then he is wrong. Nico looked at her. Or someone removed it before I reached the alley. Leonard. Possibly. Clara remembered the night before the attack. Leonard had ordered her to leave the coat in the staff room during her shift. Anyone could have reached it. She also remembered something else. My mother sewed a second layer into the inside pocket. She said. She used to hide emergency money there. Nico became still. Where is the coat now? At the penthouse. Gabriel was already moving before Nico finished giving the order. The coat arrived by private helicopter less than an hour later. Clara placed it on the dining table and opened the repaired lining with a kitchen knife. Her fingers found a narrow metal object beneath the fabric. A key. Nico recognized the engraved number. It belonged to a private deposit room beneath an old bank owned by Marco's family. The dead accountant must have placed it inside Clara's coat while Nico was unconscious or distracted in the alley. Perhaps he had reached the restaurant before dying. Perhaps he had known that Clara's ordinary coat would be ignored. Marco had destroyed Clara's home and attacked the hotel because of a key she never knew she carried. Nico closed his hand around it. This ends tonight. Clara blocked his path. What does the key open? Proof. Names. Payments. Recordings. Enough to destroy Marco and everyone who protects him. Then I am coming. No. The key was hidden in my coat. That does not make this your war. It became my war when he used my name to move weapons and sent men into my home. Nico stepped closer. I will not place you near him. You already placed me in the center when you announced I was your future wife. His expression hardened. That announcement kept you alive. It also told Marco exactly how much hurting me would hurt you. Nico had no answer. Clara lowered her voice. You cannot protect me by removing every choice I have. His eyes searched her face. If I give you choices, you may choose to leave. That was the truth beneath every order. Clara felt something inside her soften. You are afraid. Nico's jaw tightened. I am cautious. You are terrified. He turned away. Clara touched his arm. Nico. He looked down at her hand. She continued. You trust people with money, weapons, and your life. You do not trust anyone with your fear. Fear is leverage. Not with someone who loves you. The words escaped before Clara could stop them. The storm seemed to go silent. Nico looked at her. Clara's hand fell from his arm. She had not meant to confess. She had not even allowed herself to name the feeling. Nico approached her slowly. Say it again. No, Clara. You heard me? I need to know whether you meant it. She lifted her chin, even though tears burned behind her eyes. I love the man who sat in the snow and accepted soup from a stranger. I love the man who repairs old coats because he does not understand how to accept gifts. I love the man who stands outside my door because he is too afraid to sleep beside me. Her voice trembled. I do not know whether I can love Nico Salvatore. The man who makes decisions for everyone and calls control protection. He absorbed every word without moving. Then he reached into his pocket and placed the metal key in her palm. You decide, he said. Clara closed her fingers around it. They entered the underground bank together. The deposit room contained paper ledgers, recordings, photographs, and contracts documenting decades of betrayal. Marco had ordered the death of Nico's father. He had also arranged attacks against rival families, then blamed Nico to provoke a war. He planned to let the city destroy itself before taking control of what remained. Among the files, Clara found documents bearing Leonard's signature. He had opened accounts in her name and moved millions through them. There was enough evidence to clear her. There was also a photograph of Nico's father, taken moments before his death. Marco stood in the background. Nico held the photograph for a long time. Clara watched his face become empty. "This is what you wanted," she said. "No." He placed the photograph down. "I wanted to believe I was wrong." An alarm sounded. The lights went out. Emergency lamps filled the deposit room with red light. Gabriel's voice came through the radio. "We have movement at every entrance." Marco had expected them. Armed men flooded the underground corridors. Nico pushed Clara behind the steel door, while Gabriel and the guards returned fire. A smoke device rolled across the floor. Clara coughed as the room disappeared behind white fog. Someone seized her from behind. She drove her elbow backward. But the last thing she saw was Nico running through the smoke toward her. When Clara woke, she was inside an abandoned church near the harbor. Snow blew through broken stained glass windows. Candles burned along the aisle. The altar was covered with black cloth. Her hands were tied to a wooden chair. Marco Vitale stood near the altar. He was in his late 50s. Silver-haired and elegantly dressed. He looked less like a criminal than a man who funded museums. Leonard stood beside him. Clara stared at her former manager. "You should have left the city." Leonard smiled nervously. Marco promised protection. Marco looked amused. Leonard has always confused usefulness with value. Leonard's smile faded. Clara understood immediately. Marco did not intend to let him leave alive. "Where is Nico?" she asked. "Coming." "How do you know?" "Because I sent him a photograph of you sitting in the same church where his father begged for his life." Clara's stomach tightened. Marco walked toward her. Nico's father was a sentimental man. He believed loyalty could be inherited. Nico inherited that weakness. Despite all his efforts to hide it, you call loyalty weakness because nobody gives it to you willingly. Marco's expression sharpened. That is why he noticed you. You gave him something without understanding its value. A coat. No. Mercy. Marco crouched in front of her. Men like Nico are surrounded by obedience. They become addicted to the first person who offers kindness without fear. You did not save his life. Clara, you created a weakness that will destroy him. Headlights appeared through the broken windows. Black cars surrounded the church. Doors opened. Armed men moved into the snow. Nico walked alone toward the entrance. He wore a black suit. Over it, he wore Clara's burgundy coat. The damaged sleeve had been repaired again. He entered the church with empty hands. Snow melted in his dark hair. His gaze found Clara immediately. The relief in his eyes lasted only a second before cold control returned. Marco stepped behind Clara and placed a weapon against her neck. "You came wearing the coat," he said. Nico stopped halfway down the aisle. "She gave it to me when I had nothing else." "You had an empire." "Not that night." Marco smiled. "Place the evidence on the floor." Nico removed a thick envelope from beneath the coat and laid it in the aisle. "Now release her." Marco laughed. "You know better." Nico's attention remained on Clara. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head. Leonard struck the back of her chair. "Answer respectfully." Nico looked at him. Leonard stepped backward. Marco noticed the fear. "This is what you built." "Nico, a city full of men who obey because they are terrified. Yet you believe this woman loves you." Nico's eyes never left Clara. "I do not require her love." The word struck her. Then he continued. "I require her freedom to choose it." Marco's smile disappeared. Nico removed a lighter from his pocket. The envelope on the floor contained the only copies. He said, "Release Clara, and you can have them." Marco gestured toward Leonard. Leonard picked up the envelope and carried it toward the altar. Nico opened the lighter. Leonard froze. "There is another copy," Marco said. No, you would not bring the only evidence. I brought the only thing you value because you have the only thing I cannot replace. Clara's eyes burned. Marco looked down at her. There. That is the weakness. Nico touched the flame to the envelope. Fire spread across the paper. Marco shouted. Leonard dropped it. Nico kicked the burning evidence toward the candles beside the aisle. Flames climbed the black cloth and spread toward the altar. Marco moved his weapon away from Clara for 1 second. Clara threw her weight sideways. The chair fell. The gun fired. Nico crossed the distance before the echo faded. He struck Marco and drove him into the altar. Gabriel's men burst through the church doors. Gunfire erupted from the balconies as Marco's guards attacked. Nico tore the weapon from Marco's hand and turned toward Clara. Leonard grabbed her chair and dragged her toward a side passage. Clara kicked backward. Striking his knee, he fell beside her. She rolled across the floor as flames climbed the curtains. Nico reached them. Leonard drew a knife. Nico caught his wrist and broke his grip with one violent movement. The knife hit the floor. Nico struck Leonard once. The manager collapsed. Clara saw blood spreading across Nico's shirt. The gunshot had struck his shoulder. Nico ignored it. He cut the ropes around her wrists. Clara touched the wound. You are bleeding. Not enough to matter. Even then, she almost laughed. Marco rose behind him with a second weapon. Clara saw the movement reflected in a broken piece of stained glass. Nico. He turned as Marco fired. Nico pulled Clara against him. The bullet struck the wooden altar. Nico fired once. Marco fell to his knees. His weapon slid across the burning floor. Nico approached him. Marco looked up. Your father begged, he said. Nico raised the gun. Clara saw everything inside him gathering around that moment. 11 years of grief, betrayal, rage. Every night spent becoming harder than the man who had destroyed his family. Marco smiled because he believed he had finally turned Nico into the same kind of monster. Clara stepped beside him. Nico. His finger remained on the trigger. Look at me, she said. He did. She placed her hand over his. Do not give him the final piece of you. Marco reached for the fallen weapon. Nico fired. The bullet struck Marco before he could lift it. Marco collapsed. The church became quiet except for the flames. Nico stared at the body. Clara did not ask him to regret surviving. She only took the weapon from his hand. The roof groaned above them. Gabriel shouted for everyone to leave. Nico lifted Clara into his arms. I can walk? She protested. The floor is burning. You have been shot. I have survived worse. He carried her through the flames and falling snow. Outside, dozens of armed men stood around the church. Red light from the fire moved across their faces. Nico lowered Clara beside one of the cars. His knees nearly gave way. Clara caught him. For once, he allowed someone else to hold him. The evidence inside the church burned. Marco's organization fractured before sunrise. Nico had sacrificed the original documents to save Clara. But Gabriel had quietly transmitted copies of several files before the bank attack. It was enough to clear Clara's name and connect Leonard to the illegal accounts. It was not enough to destroy every corrupt official Marco had controlled. Nico accepted the loss. For the first time in his life, revenge had not been the most important thing in the room. He spent 6 days in a private hospital. Clara sat beside his bed during the first night. Nico woke shortly before dawn and found her asleep in a chair, her hand resting near his. He watched her for several minutes. Then he covered her fingers with his. Clara opened her eyes. You are awake. You stayed. You were shot because of me. I was shot because Marco had poor aim. She looked at him. You burned the evidence. Yes. Your father waited 11 years for justice. Nico's eyes moved toward the window. My father is dead. You are not. Clara swallowed. What happens now? To Marco's people, to us. His hand loosened around hers. The public engagement protected you. You no longer need it. There it was again. The careful distance. The man who could walk through gunfire was retreating because love frightened him more than violence. Clara stood. Then tell me it is over. Nico looked at her. Tell me you do not want me after I leave this room. His expression became strained. Wanting you is not the problem. What is? There is no safe way to belong to me. I did not ask to belong to you. His gaze sharpened. Then what are you asking? For you to stand beside me instead of building a cage around me? Nico looked away. Clara picked up her repaired coat from the chair. He had worn it into the church and protected it even while bleeding. The fabric smelled faintly of smoke. She placed it over the foot of his bed. You keep returning this as if the debt will disappear when I take it back. He touched the sleeve. It will not. No. Clara walked toward the door. Nico's voice stopped her. I do not know how to do this. She turned. He continued. I know how to protect territory. I know how to punish betrayal. I know how to make people fear losing me. His voice lowered. I do not know how to ask someone to stay. Clara returned to the bed, then asked badly. For several seconds, Nico Salvatore seemed more vulnerable than he had in the snow behind Bellini House. Stay, he said. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Not because you owe me. No. Not because you believe I need protection. No. Why? His hand closed around hers. Because when you leave a room, every part of me waits for you to return. She sat beside him. That is a better answer. Nico recovered slowly. The city changed around them. Leonard accepted a long prison sentence in exchange for naming officials connected to Marco. Several businesses were seized. Rival families attempted to claim Marco's territory. But Nico stopped them before the conflict reached the streets. He remained feared. He remained dangerous. Clara never asked him to become harmless. She asked him to become honest. That proved more difficult. Nico told her when his work placed her at risk. Clara told him when protection became control. They argued in penthouses, cars, kitchens, and once in the middle of a formal dinner while two politicians pretended not to listen. Nico learned not to send guards into Clara's workplace without warning. Clara learned that 2 guards were sometimes reasonable when the restaurant had already been attacked twice. Bellini House never reopened. Clara used her savings to lease a smaller location several blocks away. She refused Nico's offer to buy it for her. He offered a loan instead. She changed the interest rate before signing. He looked at the contract. This rate is insulting. It is fair. I could purchase the building, then I would find another building. Nico stared at her. Gabrielle, standing nearby, quietly left the room. Nico signed the contract. Clara named the restaurant Bennett's Table. The front served affordable meals during the day. At night, the kitchen provided free soup and warm clothing to people living on the streets. Nico never called it charity. He knew Clara disliked the word when it was used to make kindness sound superior. On the first night of winter, a year after they met, snow covered Boston again. Clara finished closing the restaurant and found a black car waiting outside. The driver stood beside the open door. Mr. Salvatore asked me to take you to the rear alley. Clara raised an eyebrow. That is not suspicious at all. She walked around the building. Nico sat against the brick wall in the exact place where she had found him. He wore a tailored black suit. Over it, he wore the burgundy coat. It had been repaired so many times that very little original fabric remained. The sleeves were still too short for him. The buttons still did not match. A cup of soup rested in his hands. Clara stopped in the snow. What are you doing, waiting for a waitress? She approached him. You own half the harbor. and you are sitting in an alley. I was told this is where important things happen. Clara smiled. Nico stood. There were no bodyguards visible, though she knew several watched from nearby rooftops. He held out the cup of soup. Clara accepted it. Then he reached into the coat pocket and removed a small ring. Her breath caught. Nico did not kneel. He knew Clara did not need a public performance, and he would never pretend submission he did not feel. Instead, he stood before her as an equal. The first night, you saw a man without power, he said. You gave him warmth before you knew his name. Snow settled in his dark hair. He continued, I spent my life believing love was a weakness people used to enter and destroy you. Then you walked into my world and proved that love could also be the reason a man refused to remain destroyed. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Nico held the ring between them. I cannot promise you a quiet life. I cannot promise that the darkness around me will disappear. His voice became softer. I can promise that I will never again confuse protecting you with owning you. I will tell you the truth, even when it makes you angry. I will stand beside you, even when you choose a road I fear. He took her hand. And every winter, I will wear this terrible coat if that is what it takes to remember the man you chose to save. Clara laughed through her tears. The coat is not terrible. It is extremely small. That sounds like a personal problem. A faint smile appeared on his face. Marry me. Clara Bennett. She looked at the feared mafia boss standing in the snow, wearing an inexpensive coat that had become the most valuable thing he owned. Yes, she said. Nico placed the ring on her finger. Then Clara reached up, caught the front of the burgundy coat, and kissed him. Black cars waited at the end of the alley. Armed men watched from the shadows. The city still feared Nico Salvatore, but Clara knew the truth beneath the power. Once, he had been a wounded stranger, freezing alone behind a restaurant. She had given him her only coat. He had returned the next night wearing it, and for the rest of his life, he never truly gave it back.